So today we're going to look at this, I believe, 1961 Zenith Space Command 300 console. So I picked this up at a local garage sale that was being held on the other side of one of the big lakes around me, and ended up buying this set. It's got a brightener on it, and the picture tube tested dead when I got it. Of course, it didn't help that at that time someone had duct tape completely covering the neck, so I couldn't see the picture tube heater to check if it was lighting, and it is not lighting most of the time. This base is really loose and the heater connection is very intermittent to the point where I can't really get a consistent connection. So we're going to try to fix that and test the picture tube on this. I also got these cool phones while I was there. You may be wondering why there's tools on this TV. Well, the day before, I went over to the Madison area and I picked up a complete spare drivetrain for my 47 Oldsmobile over yonder, so that I could get a hydromatic transmission that hopefully isn't stuck with only first gear. Don't know if this one's good or bad, but for $200 between the powertrain and the engine hoist, I'm willing to roll the dice and see what happens. I did try to do a unsticking and revival video on the engine, and it turned out to not be savable. Not sure if you can see how horrendously pitted and rusty this cylinder is, but you can contrast it to one of the cylinders that's not terribly bad. This cylinder, rusty as the Titanic. This cylinder, also rusty as the Titanic, and seized at bottom dead center, which makes freeing it up a royal pain in the ass. The two cylinders I didn't remove that aren't stuck have ring ridges that must be a 1/16 of an inch thick or more. Maybe an 1/8 of an inch thick. They're thick ring ridges. The valves are all seized. The crankshaft is seized. It's already obvious the crankshaft is seized because of the pistons. The camshaft is seized. So after filling the cylinders with oil and waiting about a day and a half and trying various things, I pulled the head off the engine to discover there was no head gasket on this engine. Do I still have a piece of them? Yes, I do. Someone glued the head onto the engine with this weird greenish transparent glue. That big blob of it was in one of the coolant passages. So someone apparently took the head off this engine, gave up, and then glued it back on. If it wasn't dead enough already, while I was trying to unstick it, I decided to put some wood into the pistons and try hammering on the pistons that were up, and I ended up banging some nice dents into the cylinder head, and at that point, this thing really was beyond saving. I'm not even sure what killed this engine, as there are multiple things that could have. If you take a look in the oil pan, that is like a solid 2 inches deep of sludge. It literally was completely covering the open bottom on the pickup tube. So this engine couldn't have been getting much, if any, oil. Most of the rod bearings had a white milkshake oily substance in them, as though this engine had a head gasket failure and the coolant and oil mixed, and that got pumped into the bearings. The oil that was in the pan didn't look like that. It mostly looked like oil and intense sludge. Between all of that, after 2.5 days of trying everything I could to get the pistons unstuck and the crankshaft to move, I finally gave up, and I cut the crankshaft just aft of the number 6 rod journal so that I could spin the flywheel and fluid clutch. This Hydromatic predates torque converters being used in automatic transmissions, so it's a fluid clutch in this. I had to spin this whole assembly around to get the, I think it's like 32 bolts or something that hold the flywheel, ring gear, whatever you want to call it, flex plate, whatever you want to call this gear. I think they actually still called it a flywheel on these transmissions rather than a flex plate. I think the flex plate came in with the torque converter transmissions. But at any rate, in order to separate the transmission from the engine, you have to get all of the bolts around here off. Take these bolts that hold the rear bell housing to the front bell housing, which is this guy here, off, and then slide the transmission off and lift the engine off of it, or drop the transmission down, either way, depending on what you're doing in or out of the car. And then unbolt these nuts off of the drive shaft output on the engine to get this off, and then remove this, and then you're done getting the whole thing separated. Note to self, next time you have to take a stuck engine and transmission apart, make sure to drain the transmission before you get to the point where you need to turn things on sides to get at the underside. Anyway, in this video I'm going to try to do a resurrection on this Zenith. I'm going to see if I can get the picture tube to come back to life. If I can, we'll try to get a picture out of it. This set, the photo finish is wrecked. It's bad all over. I think the one side that popped off is the only good part. One of the legs got eaten by like a dog or something, or a beaver or something. I love the cabinet style on this set, but the condition is just so shagged out. I think I'm going to end up turning this thing into somebody's fish tank project. I'm probably going to keep the screen bezel and the chassis, and I'm going to migrate the Space Command components into my blonde Zenith in the basement. So let's get these phones and tools out of here. That's better. Now we can see just about the full horror of the top of this cabinet. It is stained all over. It's missing large amounts of photo finish. The photo finish is ground off in places. You can actually tell the difference between the masonite portion of the cabinet, which is everything aft of this line, and this line, which actually is some real wood. As you can see, this base is really, really loose. We're going to get rid of this duct tape. This is a television set, not a duck. Electrical devices deserve electrical tape. What I'm going to do right now is I am going to put my DMM to beep mode. When we get continuity, we should get a beep like that. So, on pretty much all CRTs, the heater pins are on either side of the locating key. This locating key right here. So we're going to hook up to these two pins, and sometimes we get continuity wiggling this around, so this is going to need some work. Now I could and probably should desolder all the base pins, pull the base off, add some high temperature RTV silicone sensor safe between the base and the CRT glass, lengthen the wires that go through the pins with lamp cord so that they're easier to fish back through the hollow pins, clean the hollow pins out of all of their solder so that I can fish said leads through, thread base on with RTV silicone to hold it, and then put a piece of tape around to give a nice consistent bead between the two, and resolder all the leads and all that. But I don't have a lot of faith that this picture tube is going to be any good, so what we're going to do is we're going to electrical tape it, and I am going to reflow the heater pins with my soldering iron that is preparing to give me a hot foot. Stay on, sketchy camera placement. There, with it like that, I can actually see if the heater's glowing, unlike when I bought this thing. Soldering gun's nice and hot, so let's just heat the pin up real good. Jam a little solder down it. That heats the other pin up. I see some of the remaining pins have hollow ends, which indicates that the solder has left them in some unpleasant capacity. So let's just try to flow a little bit of fresh into those two pins that are clearly lacking solder. Just feed a little bit in there now. Clean up the one we accidentally got some extra solder on. There. Now let's hook the DMM back up. Okay, now we got consistent heater pin continuity. Okay, so the camera ran out of memory. It also split the last video file, so it's possible I lost the scene where I unsoldered the base off of the picture tube. I have my homemade universal test adapter for my picture tube tester hooked onto the picture tube. Right now we have ran through every step except for 6 and 7, which is set the G2 cutoff voltage, so we will do that. We want 2 division increase on the meter fairly exactly. Now we are reading emission, and I see why there was a brightener on this tube. It's enough to make a picture, but not a great amount of picture. Probably give this thing a whirl on elevated heater voltage for a while and see if it self-rejuvenates. So I'm going to toggle down to adjust heater voltage, and we are going to crank her up to, I could do 8.4 if I wanted to set it to ultra cook, but let's just do 8 for now, and we'll put her back on read emission. And I actually want to do something here. I want to readjust the G2 voltage to correct for this amount of heater voltage to achieve correct emissions. That's about what it'll do on a brightener, which still isn't great. We're gonna let it cook like that for probably 2 or 3 hours and see what happens. I still don't exactly plan on saving this set, but we'll give it one last hurrah before we use this to upgrade my Zenith Winthrop to Space Command. This is a local set out here in the Milwaukee-Madison combined market. I mean, really, you can get Madison stations here with a good antenna, and you can get Milwaukee stations here with a less good antenna. So there's VHF and UHF antenna terminals on this, which is an option on these 60s era sets. Is there a chassis number? 16D21 Q. The Q is probably for remote. Oh, we have a tube chart. So this tells us what's in the cabinet. There's the Space Command chassis in that bottom corner. Here's all the tubes that this chassis uses. It's pretty cool. Well, it's already improving after only about 3 minutes on the higher heater voltage. We're going to readjust G2 once more, click it back to read emission, and let it sit some more. If after about 20 minutes it doesn't improve any further, what I'm going to do is turn the tester off for about a minute and retest the tube, but with the heater voltage lowered to the correct 6.3 volts and see what we get. Well, it's probably been about 10 minutes and it's not really improving any further, so let's click it to off for a minute and we'll turn the heater down to minimum. Okay, I think that's been long enough. Let's readjust the heater to 6.3 volts exactly. And HK leakage, it's fine. Also fine. G1 voltage, we never really turned it down. Let's just try to make it more precise. That's ready for G2 voltage setting. And, okay. And emission. It's usable. Looks like it wants to slump, but it's usable. Yeah, I can see it slumping. It just dropped over the course of me watching it from 78 to 70. Wow, it's going down to 60. Yeah, this is probably going to drop back down to red on me. I'm going to let this sit a while and see what happens. So it's sat at 6.3 volts heater voltage, and it's back down into questionable. Let's go over to heater, and that's basically 6.3. That's not a good picture tube, so I'll probably give this thing a quick resurrection to give it one last boom before it becomes part of my other set. Now we know where that's at. Well, I tried the tube out for the first time in a few days. It came up to about 30 in the bad range. So I decided to turn it up to rejuvenate 1 and whack the neck with a stick while pushing the button, and it shot up to about 80, and it has been slowly slumping back down. I doubt it's going to hold, but let's find out. And this is with the correct 6.3 volts heater voltage. What I'm going to do is, despite the conditions of the tube right now, I am going to blow all of the solder out of these pins, put some lead extension tassels onto these individual wires coming out of the neck, refred the base with some silicone, and see if I can't make this tube good enough to plug the set onto and give this set a quick resurrection. How I clean the pins on the tube is I press the soldering iron tip up to the pin. I leave this nice 80-watt soldering iron here cooking the pin for a good 10-15 seconds, something like that. Once I feel like the pin's good and hot, take the soldering iron off. Farmer's blow. Cleans all of the lead out. Getting a good angle to see through the populated pins is interesting. I clean that pin out nice and good. On to the next one. It'll probably be okay. And you can hear the bakelite squealing from the heat. You know at that point that you've definitely gotten it hot enough. So, if you have lingering rosin or other contaminants, a 9-pin tube or certain electron guns use the same pin size, such as this electron gun out of the necked predictatandem. you can actually use the pins to poke through the hollow pins on the picture tube base and get it to where you can see through them really well. So this base is now all cleaned up and ready for reuse. Just need to get me some silicone and solder me some lead extensions onto these, solder some lead extensions onto the picture tube. So to reattach the base, we need two things. We need lamp cord strands, and we need RTV silicone. I favor this stuff because it's high temperature rated and it's sensor safe. They make a version of this that isn't sensor safe, so watch carefully what you get. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lop off this entire hank of wire here, and we're going to pull individual strands out of here. We're going to use 2 strands for the heater pins and a single strand for each of the other pins. The heater pins carry more current, so if you can't get the thicker original wire into the pin and soldered into the pin, you want to at least have enough material in this to have a shot of not melting down carrying the current. Yeah, you can see what I'm doing like that. Okay, so for starters, we will take one of these and wrap it around the focus electrode, because that is effectively low-hanging fruit. I'm actually going to try to twist these wires together a little bit past the solder point so that I don't develop a giant lump. I just realized I didn't plug my soldering iron in. I'm doing good today. While that warms up, I'll just prep some other pins and then we can... So we'll just kind of loop it around. Now, because this tube is a fairly worn out specimen, I'm not being super careful with bending the leads that come out of the glass, but generally it is a good idea to be super careful with them, especially on tubes that are good, and even more so for ones that are rare or high value. You can use this technique when the base is really messed up and the connections are really messed up like this, but you can also use it in cases where the base is glued on well, but you've lost heater continuity. And that one's end is good for it to work. Ooh, we got some Shango airplane buzzy action going on. I'm going to keep filming. What's going to happen is I am probably going to cut away and you're going to see the finished product of this. Unless, of course, I screw up or something really interesting or amusing happens between then and now. Oh, and actually, before I do a cutaway, one thing I should also mention is if you have a case where the base is on securely, but you lose heater continuity, that can sometimes happen when the leads that come out of the glass rot off almost flush with the glass. And you can dissolve the original glue to get the base off when the base is still firmly glued on by immersing the base of the tube, soaking it in ammonia cleaning solution. The ammonia will dissolve the original adhesive that held the base on. I did that once before on a 1955 Philco TV123 chassis, their first color set. I have one with an original Philco 21AXP22 in it, and that tube, about a year after I got the set, the picture tube heater wiring rotted at the base, and in fact multiple leads ended up breaking off or being busted or rotted off. I ended up having to take the base off and fix multiple wires that were busted off flush or nearly flush. On that tube I was lucky that there were essentially little glass mountains built up around each lead that went through the glass, and I was able to grind down those mountains a little bit very carefully with a very, very fine file. I had it suggested to me that I should instead use a cutoff wheel from a Dremel rotary tool, and I actually, in retrospect, if I had heard that before I did the procedure, probably would have done that method instead. At any rate, I was successful in saving that Philco tube, so that is a way of doing that. You can also occasionally use that for changing the base on octal and fat pin era tubes. Like I've heard some people will take 3Q5 octal audio output tubes and use them in place of something like 01A or something like that from the 20s that is much scarcer but electrically similar enough to be compatible. And we're back. These are all of the lead extensions we've soldered on here. What I'm going to do next is, I'm going to put the bead of silicone on this, I think you can see it, this little shoulder in the glass right here. I'm going to put a nice bead in there. Then I'm going to thread this onto the wires and seat it as far as I can. Then I'll tape the tube base on and try to do some final soldering and a quick check with my CRT tester to make sure that everything functions. Silicone on, I'm going to just do a quick check to make sure that all of the wires I have added on here will thread through their respective pins on the base so that I know I can install the base successfully once the silicone is on. Once the silicone's on, you don't want to be messing around with trying to deal with plugged pins on the socket. You want to get it on quick enough that you're not dealing with partially cured silicone when you slip the base on. Oh, I didn't even know it. Okay. Just gloop this sucker up. Probably using way too much silicone. That's fine. I don't care. This tube is probably junk. So whatever happens to it, happens to it. I just want it done up good enough that it'll go together the way I want it to and work the way I want it to. What's nice is they generally configure the leaders in a sensible way so that they fit through the pins in a logical order. Monty Python reminds you to pick sensible leaders.
And welcome to Election Night Special. There's great excitement here at the moment as we should be getting the first result through any moment now.
Well, it's a straight fight here at Leicester. On the left of the returning officer you can see Arthur Smith, the sensible candidate, and his agent. And on the other side is the silly candidate.
Joseph R. Biden Jr.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I'm not confident he's changed behavior. What do you do all the time? When did I say I was confident? I said what I said was, let's get it straight.
I wrote the bill on the environment.
The receptionist, the salon, they may be going to the saloon, I don't know. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer. And why can't, for the longest time, Delaware had the highest cancer rate in the nation. What? Well, look. There's been a little change in the arrangement of who's on the stage because of the First Lady's husband contracting COVID. But look at this room and what you see. That's right. She's fine. It's me. Not together. The second lady, the first gentleman. How about that? I want to thank that fellow down under. Thank you very much, pal. Appreciate it, Mr. Prime Minister.
Well, there's the first result, and the silly party have held Leicester. What do you make of that, Norman?
Well, this is largely as I predicted, except that the silly party won.
I would have gotten away with filming my video too if it weren't for you meddling kids and your background noise.
All the loose ends in this case. Blasted meddling kids.
That invention is worth a fortune.
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Now that we have the leads correctly ordered, theoretically I should be able to run a quick test. Yeah, this tube still tests really weak, but we've got no leakage anywhere that we would want to avoid having leakage, so let's disconnect, turn our tester off, disconnect it, and solder all of the leads onto their pins correctly. And then we're going to walk away for approximately 24 hours while this mess cures. And then after that, we'll tube up to the TV and do a resurrection video on this thing. And most likely a making one good TV out of two video, or I should say one better TV out of two TVs, by taking the Space Command module out of this junker and the tuner and whatnot, and transplanting them into my 1960 Zenith Winthrop console. You know, this tube tested even weaker than 30 when I tested it just now with the correct lead configuration. This tube's basically junk. Instead of waiting for it to dry nicely, I should just bang the brightener back onto it and start getting ready to give her the old resurrection tip. Yeah, that's all back together. Could have done the silicone cleaner and came up with something that looks just a little bit better than what the end result's going to look like after this finishes drying, but I don't care. Okay, Variac is set to 30 volts. Let the Variac session begin. I went in and I took the liberty of removing this box cover from the remote relay mechanisms. This here's the channel relay, and this is the power and volume stepper relay. you can manually work it a few times and get the set into the power on state. I did briefly run it at 30 yesterday to find the power on state on that relay. With that relay off, the remote draws about 8 watts, and with the relay on, the remote and TV chassis combined draw about 25 watts. And you have to also make sure the master on-off volume knob is pulled out, although in this case there's no knob, so it's the shaft of the knob. And because it's Zenith, it's gonna work, so we need us a signal source. Okay, a little while ago we cranked it up to 40 volts. The wattage went up to about 26-ish, I'd like to say. And it's now settled down to 23 watts. So we're going to crank it up to 50 volts. And let it simmer a bit. Pretty soon I am going to be working on getting the pan off of this transmission so I can assess how sludgy it is, if it's sludgy at all, and what the state of this is. I have high hopes for this transmission because the fluid that was in it was still fairly red. If you got a lot of it on your hands and like pulled it up, there was some blackishness to it, but that indicates that they were changing the fluid at least somewhat regularly in this, at least to my mind. It's way better than what was in the transmission in this thing when I first started working on it. The transmission was full of, well, it had a pretty substantial amount of sediment in the pan. I think it was covering the pickup on it. And after dissolving a lot of that sediment and getting down into it, I actually found some gear teeth in the pan on this transmission. That was before I really drove it more than about a block. After cleaning the pan out on it at that time, I put the pan back on, started driving it around, and I drove it for a little bit over a year and probably 3-4 tanks of gas. I probably drove it a good 50 miles, I would guess, in various short trips, and that was enough to get the transmission to kill itself off the rest of the way, although putting in the thinner magic transmission fix fluid, whatever the heck name it was I think the final straw that killed the transmission in that. We are not going to ever put the thin stuff in this transmission. We're going to put the correct Dextron fluid into this, and maybe the thicker fluid, because a little bit of the thicker fluid in this one after I ruined it got me from having absolutely nothing other than first to occasionally getting it to shift into second for one shift per drive. So the thicker stuff clearly doesn't hurt this, but the thinner stuff definitely does. But I don't want to put in the thicker stuff unless something was really, really bad. How's my Space Command doing? 33.7, huh? That's not a bad wattage to be drawing at 50 volts. Let's crank it up to 60 and see what it does. 47 watts. That's not too bad. And keep an eye on it since it's climbing a bit. Don't run away on me now. I'll let it sit like that for a minute. Can't tell if any of the tube heaters are glowing. That reminds me. This has been sitting about a day. Let's do a tape peel on the base and see. Silicone's not holding it perfectly, but it's holding it good enough to keep it from falling off. Oh, I can see the picture tube heater glowing faintly. Yeah, and you guys can too if you look at that little orange spot in there. So we definitely got power to the TV chassis going on. It's fairly stable. I could probably give this at another 10 volts, I think. Wattage is definitely well below what it should be consuming, so... That was an interesting noise. Oh, I'm kicking a can on the floor. That's a good way to concern myself over nothing. I'm going to, while I'm here, let's see here. That's contrast. Vertical hole. You know, tone's not super necessary, and I need a knob for brightness, so let's just stick this onto what I believe is the brightness shaft right here. Let's just turn the brightness up to the moon. That way we have a fighting chance of seeing something if it does anything. And if we're not paying attention when the screen comes up to a bright horizontal line from no vertical deflection, we'll sear a nice line into the phosphor on our weak picture tube. That sounds like a plan. Nope. That's fairly stable, and it's a reasonable wattage to be drawing at 70 volts, so let's crank it up to 80 volts and see what happens. I honestly don't care about damaging the main TV chassis on this set. What I bought it for was the remote chassis and hardware. What becomes of the main TV chassis and the very weak picture tube is not really any of my concern. Oh, and you are a big spider. Stop crawling towards my transmission. I hate spiders. Dang. Well, I guess we can say I was right. My predictive abilities are too good. Vertical hold does nothing. So that's great. Clearly we are going to have our work cut out for us resurrecting this thing. If the vertical is completely dead, I might have to change out all the vertical caps rather than just one or two. We're at 80 volts right now. Crank the voltage up to 90 volts. Okay, well, we have evidence that the audio system works. Hey, we're actually getting some vertical deflection. Oh, that's right. Well, clearly the remote power tuning motor thingy is not happy, so let's unplug the remote motor. Oh! I might be on the correct channel for my test pattern generator. Those dashed lines seem to correspond. Let's turn the generator off, and back on, and off, and back on. Okay, we have reception. Cool. Now that tells us that most of the stages in this thing are, as it randomly dies despite the generator still being on, drawing 116 watts at 91 volts. Let's increase the voltage another 10. And now we're drawing 141 watts at 100 volts. Let's turn the brightness down to where we're just barely getting a noticeable amount of light. Wonder if I stuck a adjustment screwdriver into the vertical linearity and height pots, if I could convince this to give me some actual deflection. Might be worth a shot. Wattage seems stable. Let's crank it up another 10 volts to 110 volts AC. In fact, let's just turn it up to 117-ish. Yeah, that seems reasonable. 190 watts of power consumption. Traces of horizontal and signal passage on this set. I think it's safe to say I need some more tools to continue working on this. Okay, we got our guaranteed control reacher 9000. Just stab it in there till we feel the vertical pot. And wait. Oh, there's something. Looks terrible, but it's something. So I think we can say the vertical, I believe, linearity pot here is not great. Let's play with the height while we're in here. I think our horizontal is off frequency. Maybe that's the wrong direction. Oh, come on now. Come on now. Go back where I asked you to be. That still doesn't... Nah, that's definitely the wrong direction. You can tell by suppression in the width of the deflection. Yeah, that might be right. Let's try the linearity control again. Well, it's definitely something. This linearity pod is just junk. How crunchy it is in that sudden jump from nothing to maximum. There's definitely problems here. I think I need to get a test pattern that has a circle in it so I can tell exactly how far off frequency the horizontal and vertical actually are. How much brightness are we cranking on this? Almost all of it. Well, it is actually giving a watchable picture, which is impressive. Okay, I got my channel 13 running the Philips 4-digit test pattern down in the basement. Let's see if I can force the Now, tuning knob's jammed. This front knob's fine tuning. The rear knob on the back of the cabinet here is channel selection. This knob is jammed, and I think I can guess why pretty readily. So I'm going to get the back off this TV set and try to convince the tuner to do tuner stuff. Oh, I'm going to need my cheater cord. One of the problems with Space Command Zeniths, especially ones that have been sitting for a long period of time, is they have a strong tendency for the Space Command gearing mechanisms to gum up. And when they gum up, it becomes difficult to tune the set. That's definitely not helping our cause here. Why am I filming removing screws from the cabinet? This is certainly dumb and boring. Oh, I gotta get the interlock 1 and 2, or I'm never gonna get the back off. Man, I don't know if you can see this, but down here the back's delaminating too on this side. And circa 60-61, Zenith was not using the most durable of glues. I love how someone tried to make a picture tube protector out of a coat hanger. That's just delightfully pointless. I wonder if the back's ever been off this set. This bottom screw I don't think I've ever seen before installed on anything. Note to self, never set down your nut driver because it takes you 3 minutes to locate it every time you do. Oh, well, that's great. Forgot the antenna's still connected. And I got rid of my pocket screwdriver, aka Swiss Army knife with bits that function well as straight edge and Phillips screwdrivers. So just use the old house key method. Come on, house key. You're not my house key, you're my car key. You're not either of those things. You're a screwdriver. Got it. Oh, stop falling over, you damn antenna. Okay, now we can get at the... You know what? If you're gonna be such a pain in the ass, you stupid pair of rabbit ears, we got a place that'll actually hold you correctly right here. Go to your home and stay in your home.
Oh, home! That's your home! Are you too good for your home?
Okay, so this mechanism is jammed up. That's great. Okay, so this was the power cable to the tuner that I unplugged, which is what I wanted to unplug, so that's good. So, you remove these Space Command tuners from the back. There's a couple of little inset screws here that you take out. Once you've taken them out, you... Okay, so I just changed the save location from the internal storage on my phone to the SD card, so now I should be able to record for longer without filling up memory and the dumb operating system settings corrupting oftentimes the last video file recorded when the phone memory size limit is reached, which is great. So we know that the SAMs for this set is 467-2. That is in, I think, that cabinet behind the set down there. So I'm going to pull this out of my way and fish it out. Schematic acquired. So I've got this diabolical little idea. This is the only good panel on this entire cabinet. And there's only one genuinely bad panel on the entire 1960s set. And that panel is the top, and drat. It's about 2 to 3 inches too narrow. For just a brief moment, I had this cool idea that if this was the exact same size as the top of this cabinet, which it clearly isn't, that I would be able to bang the top out of my nice Keeper 60 set and glue this in its place, but guess that won't be happening. Shucks. Well, maybe next time. Maybe I'll find another Zenith Winthrop that has some grievous problem, but the top is in good shape. That would be nice. Here's the schematic for the set. As you could see from my adjustments earlier, the vertical linearity was adjusting the amount of fold over, and there's some weird behavior in the pot. It is what it is. I'm pretty sure that this capacitor on the vertical linearity is a problem. So I'm going to get the set apart and change that. Also, before I do that, I'm going to get the tuner bolted back in just so that it's not loose and in my way. So, in preparing to get the chassis out to, well, put it frankly, to try to change out that vertical cap to see if that gets us back vertical deflection, I found something that's disturbingly troublesome for service. This jack right here is basically a speaker input jack for the cabinet, so that if you bought a Zenith stereophonic phonograph that didn't have two speakers but had a stereo amplifier, you could plug the speaker system from this console into that as an extension speaker. Well, they crimped the wiring for this jack here into the spade terminals for the speaker, and then the speaker wire goes up here, and they did the same thing at the speaker. So basically, you have to either unplug both speakers and carefully fish the harness out with the chassis and fish it back in later, or you have to take a 1/4-inch socket or wrench or something and undo this external stereo speaker jack from the chassis to get the speakers unhooked. This is a surprisingly service unfriendly feature on Zenith's part. I am blown away that they did it in this manner. Yeah, they soldered this on, so you couldn't even unplug it from the speaker jack. You had to physically remove the blasted speaker jack. It's a cool feature, but dang, that is a bad way of implementing it. What they should have done, and what I may do, because I'm thinking about transferring this stereo speaker jack to my other chassis, is they should have they shouldn't have crimped the speaker cables into the main harness for the speakers. What they should have done is soldered that to the terminal strip there. That way, you could cleanly unplug the speakers without having to remove the stupid speaker connector jack from the cabinet. I imagine they probably didn't do it that way much longer, and they probably got a nice earful from their service techs out in the field over that. Oh yeah, the main power switch is still hooked in. That's great. Well, I think the cap I want to service is in this part right here. So maybe I can just sneak the chassis out just enough, lay on my back like an auto mechanic, clip the lead, and then clip lead the replacement vertical cap in and see how that works. I just want to see this thing run like it would have originally had for about 5 minutes before I start ripping it off for parts. And I had a second jokes on me moment just after I paused the camera and started pulling on the chassis and realized it wasn't coming out. These remote tuners, they kind of interfere with the picture tube. And the remote chassis on the other side interferes with scooching the chassis over this way to get it away from the tuner. So you have to pull the tuner to pull the chassis on this set. That is another great service-friendly design. Right up there with non-openable hoods and lifelong oil lubrication that cannot be changed. So the picture tube in this set's a 21CX-P22, and it apparently was a local rebuild. That's not a rebuild, it says it's a brand new picture tube. Maybe. I wonder if we actually were making these things new back then in this city. I kind of doubt it. It'd have to be one heck of an operation to be building up the glass shells. I mean, maybe they were buying brand new glass shells from Corning and phosphoring them and gunning them and building them up into tubes, but I don't know. Interesting bit of history, though. I wonder if that company was any good, or if they, or if the tube's weak right now because that company could have done better. Hard to say. I don't know if my camera just stopped on me or if I forgot to hit record like an idiot. But this is the underside of the chassis. Someone at some point tacked a new 40 microfarad 150, new circa 1962 maybe, in parallel with the original capacitor, and there's a bunch of bumble bombs and Almenco white ceramic paper capacitor bombs. I just tacked this 100 micro hard 60 volt in place to replace the I disconnected this lead from the terminal here. This lead only goes to this 100 micro 50 volt cap, so this 100 micro hard 60 volt will be a fine temporary replacement. I discovered that the linearity potentiometer on this thing I shouldn't say that. The linearity pot on this thing is baked. It's badly baked. That's a fun and interesting problem. What do I even want to do about that? So the pot just connects onto the chassis, and it's like I think a 1500 ohm. I think I could probably get my Dremel knockoff up here, buzz these rivets off, knock this pot off, and install something to simulate its electrical characteristics. That seems like a valid approach. Oh, and it's nice to see this one has the cover cap still taped on nicely. Aside from this one lytic here and a couple of the tubes, maybe more than a couple of the tubes on the chassis, this is actually a very original set inside electrically. This I don't really like. Did Zenith really use this knob from stock, or did somebody just hack this on here? Because this doesn't look like a Zenith horizontal hold knob of any ilk that I've ever seen. Whatever. So I went through my pot stash, potentiometers, fellas. And I came up with a 1K potentiometer. I wonder who made this. CTS. They made some pretty good stuff. This is definitely beefier than what was in the set. A 470 resistor that measures, instead of 260 like the one that's in the set right now, this one measures about 700. So it'll help make up for this one being about 500 ohms too low and missing its stop. I also decided to grab a 0.1 microfarad cap. This one was part of an old Hickok 660. This generator, this crosshatch / gated rainbow generator, wasn't really functioning, and I bought this because I was hoping it had early NTSC and not just gated rainbow, or I should say pre-NTSC color bars, but it doesn't. So I decided to scrap this thing out, but before I did, before I completely scrapped it out, I realized this thing is a vacuum tube agile modulator for video, and I'm actually going to try to repurpose it for that end, because it did actually seem to have RF output. That's probably its own future video if I get around to making it work correctly. And another thing I found which is kind of special is this 9.3 mega ohm pot. You normally don't find them this high of resistance, and I could actually use this significantly. I actually can use this pot for this set, which I believe the convergence potentiometer on this burnt up on me. So, actually not convergence, focus. The focus potentiometer burned up on me. I know that these CT100 based sets use fairly high mega ohm resistors for their focus and convergence. One of them I think is 15 mega ohms and the other's like 5 or 10, I forget. But that could potentially be very useful in replacing the pot that this set's missing. So that was an advantageous find in my junk box. Let's get that Zenith fixed. Okay, time to do a potentiometer delete. Let's just get that cable out of there. Okay, let's see if that, oh yeah, that seems like, yep. There we go. And, yeah. That pot's pretty baked. Yeah, okay. That goes into the garbage pile with the resistor that was feeding it. And I still have to get that piece of garbage off of there. Can't really film and solder easily with how things are right now, so I'll get this new pot buzzed in here and come back to you. Okay, so this pot was already wired essentially the right way. I might have the direction of rotation versus effect on screen reversed, but electrically it's right. So I wired the wiper and the end to this this ground point on the metal casing, and the point that'll vary resistance is here, so that'll all be good. Let's just get this roughly into chassis. There's a point here, right there, where it kind of locks in. There's just enough clearance that the terminal's not touching. I'm going to wish I was born with more arms and legs. Well, more arms. I don't want to be an insect. Okay. Okay, we've got this pot dialed into maximum resistance. And we've got all of that stuff on the linearity changed out. There is one cap I want to change. I want to change C48, this point 1, which goes to pin 1 of the vertical output tube, which is, I think, this one here? Yeah, it goes to it through a 1,000 ohm resistor, and that is 1,000. Yeah, so it's this cap right here. I'm going to change on this cap. Not going to even bother testing it. Let's change it and come back. Okay, those are all the components that hypothesis tells me are probably bad, except for the cap that this replaces, which is a chassis mount that I am leaving in because it serves other purposes, like helping the birds make obnoxious noises. Okay, so with luck, when I put the chassis back in the cabinet, we will have fully functioning vertical. Let's find out. That's looking promising. Come on, vertical hold. Yeah. It's getting more egg shape, which is worrying me, but let's ignore the egginess. Okay. So that's vertical height. Seems like it wants less and less cathode resistance to do its thing in a linear way. And it's slowly cooking out that 470 resistor. I got another one that works better. I think I've probably had about as much fun as I care to with this set. So looks like my remote chassis only had one cycle of the 2 buttons left in it. That's a shame. I'll have to recap that before I put it into the other set. I kind of want to see if this thing has audio. I'm going to try to get some audio going through this. Oh, hey, that does actually. Horizontal does center up with sync. That's not actually too bad considering the picture tube's a wee bit that way in the cabinet compared to what it should be. And probably burning up that 470 ohm resistor in that control slowly. The infamous almost spade-shaped circle. Maybe that's why they call them test cards in certain parts of the world. Now, let me get some audio on this so I can hear how it sounds. Okay, so let's get the signal source rocking. Okay. Now we just turn the volume up until the, oh wait. Until we start to get flickers of audio over mod. Just like that. That tells us we got about the right amount of audio. So we do have audio coming through. A little bit distorted. That's probably the original capacitors in here.
Not the zoo interchange heading north. That is smooth travel right there right now. The only area right now is 94 eastbound. You'll find slowdowns from 70th, but they will clear up once you get past Quality Road. That is James Shannon. Earlier, exit at Mission Boulevard, the right shoulder blocked, but just causing a little bit of slowdown again from 70th through Holly Road on 94 eastbound. That is your KLH hometown traffic at 554.
Right, Stones at 6. Pat Benatar coming up in a few, and Pearl Jam coming up. Jam right. Gordon Falls disturbing.
See the buzz control. Let me see if I can reduce the buzz. Man, the Illinois people are trying to advertise their cars up here.
Take the time to pass it on. This Father's Day, get your dad a gift he'll love, like 25% off all new Carhartt Force pockets.
You know, I'm not completely happy with it yet. Let's mess around a little bit more and try to get the vertical a little bit better. Well, it's not the output tube. That's the weakest of the two sections. The other section is super, super strong. I guess maybe I want to round up some capacitors and try recapping the vertical. Maybe I should just bring my capacitor tester upstairs. Sure, why not? Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, since I have a new pan gasket on the way for this transmission tomorrow, I am going to remove the pan and try to get a feel for how bad it actually is. I'm curious to see how much sludge is in this pan. It's like the one in my other one. The sludge will be nearly covering the pickup. If it's less sludge and there's no gear teeth in this pan, I'm going to be a very happy man. At least I'm going to feel a lot better about installing this, probably within the next week or two. If possible, I'd really like to get this done in time to be able to drive the Oldsmobile to one of the WRCI swap meets this year and do a few other things. That's probably not the way to get that separated. Well, since we're working on a Zenith right now, let's push this thing way beyond its mission statement and be amazed as it somehow exceeds its mission statement. Come on. You're like halfway loose now. Am I missing a bolt? No, I'm not missing a bolt. Is there gas in the car? Yes, there's gas in the car. That got it. Oh, wow. Look at this. There's almost no sludge in here. This is beautiful. Check this out. I mean, there's a little bit of a surface film, but I mean, this is really, really good. Tastes like ATF to me. Not an excessive amount of clutch material. This is going to be, I don't want to jinx myself, but I have very high confidence now that this is going to be a good transmission. It's excellent. There's no gear teeth. It's in good condition. Pickup screen looks excellent. This is a good transmission right here. I'm feeling jazzed right now. So that was the transmission pan of the donor drivetrain. This is the engine pan of the donor drivetrain. There is enough sludge in here to kill an elephant. So the donor drivetrain had no oil filter and a paper element air filter. I guess that's what you'd call it, a dry element air filter, something like that. It had a conventional modern style air filter and no oil filter. Its oil pan lifter chamber were both sludge to all hell, but the transmission was perfect and sludge-free. The engine that's been in my car since I bought my car has an oil filter and an oil bath air cleaner. Its transmission was sludged to hell, but I have never looked inside the engine. If I can get a new oil pan gasket, I actually am considering taking the oil pan off of the good engine I've got in my car. There's part of me right now that wants to bet that the engine that runs that's in my car right now probably has very little, if any, sludge in its oil pan, making it the exact opposite engine and transmission sludge situation of the parts engine. In all irony, I may end up building one good powertrain out of the good halves of two bad powertrains. Let me get you in here for a close-up. Look at that. The pickup screen on the transmission is just beautiful. Flawlessly clean. The pan looks like a mildly, lightly used transmission oil pan. This thing is great. I have really high hopes for this transmission now. Okay, we're back on this, I think 61 Zenith. So a lot of time has passed between the last filming on this and right now. I think I bought this set on Memorial Day, and Labor Day has now came and passed. Basically, since starting on the Oldsmobile, I haven't gotten much of a chance to finish the resurrection on this thing. It basically works at this point, but there are two issues. One is the vertical isn't working correctly, and two is that the remote receiver has died. I suspect you guys probably won't have any video footage of the remote receiver for the brief time that it did work, because I think I lost that footage due to some weird quirks of these stupid cell phone cameras, where when the phone runs out of memory, and instead of stopping the filming with enough space left to add the finalization data on the video file that makes it into a valid video file, the phone just goes, "Nope, out of space, can't do that. Your video file's not usable." I love smartphones. Right now I'm variacing it back up. But my plan is, once I get a quick shot of it in its current state, is I'm going to just start attacking capacitors in this set. My suspicion is that this 1000 volt 0.015 capacitor C50 here might be leaky and drawing excessive current through this tube here. I say that because it seemed like it was overheating these two cathode resistors and drawing a lot of current. And I already replaced C48 on this unit, so there really isn't any way that this tube could be biased enough to be drawing ridiculous current unless the plate load was absurd. At least that's the way I see it. Maybe there's something completely out in left field wrong with this. That is entirely possible. At any rate, I want to get this thing working. Remote control too, because I'm going to be transplanting the remote parts from this set into my Zenith insert cabinet model name that you've forgotten here. And I'm going to be probably disposing of this set's cabinet. I mean, I'm either disposing of the cabinet or I'm selling the complete set. I'm probably going to, after I complete the resurrection, get this thing up on Vintage Television Marketplace and local marketplace as quickly as I can, and see if I can get the thing sold properly. And I may also try to get the YouTube video up in time so that people watching the video who might want to save this thing from becoming a fish tank have a chance. I really would like to keep all of the remote guts from this set, and really all the guts from it, period, and make my other Zenith nicer, but if someone wants to give me a stupid amount of profit for this thing to keep it whole, money does talk. Although it usually sounds like dead presidents. There we go. There's raster. Interesting that the phone has the shutter bar effect, even though it's not visible to the naked eye. Those diagonal lines you're seeing on screen are not really visible to me, but... oh yeah, I know. One of the reasons why. Fluorescent lighting. It flickers at 60 Hertz, and the phone will generally sync its frame rate to the brightest light source in the room, so that you don't see the entire room flickering when you're filming in a fluorescently lit room. But as a side effect, it doesn't sync to the television screen, so you'll get those shutter bars. Yeah, the tuner got dirty. That was an interesting sound. Something definitely sparked. As Tom is using a metal key to adjust the vertical size potentiometer. Yeah, she gets more egg-shaped as she warms up. And the bottom starts to pull up. I'm pretty sure that's a capacitor failing, so I'm going to turn it off, hook up my soldering iron and my Heathkit C3, and try to force the offending capacitor to reveal itself. Okay, so this nice little bumblebee is C50. We are going to desolder an end of this and connect it up to the C3. So it seems like that cap might be bad. One thing that's a problem is this Heathkit doesn't exactly float its chassis voltage with respect to ground. And this chassis is touching ground. As is my keister. I'm sure I'm going to shock myself real bad on this at some point. So I'm going to, I think, desolder this cap the rest of the way and recheck it floating. However, I'm going to make up a replacement for it right now. I need a couple of 332s in... not 332s. A couple of 333s in series. It's a .015 at 1000 volts. If I put two of these .033s in series, two of these 630 volt 0.33s in series, it'll become 1260 volts, and it'll become a .0165, I believe, if I'm doing the head math correctly. Good news, everybody. So, this is the leakage test for this cap, and it is indeed bad. It's leaking at 450 volts. I wonder what the capacitance on this bad cap looks like. Yeah, there's barely any eye opening, and it occurs at a decent bit higher capacitance than the cap should be, so... yeah, this is definitely a failed capacitor, and this would probably explain our vertical nonlinearity issues. So, we've tacked our replacement in. Let's flick it on. And let's see how she does. Good old garage floor recap-orama work. Taking me back to my teen years. And to my college years, but That was indoors on carpet. Carpet smells really good when you burn holes in it with a soldering iron. Or a 5U4 rectifier tube with one of these chassis sitting on its side. Ask me how I know. Oh, that's right, I unplugged the interlock cord because I wanted to remove any leakage through the power line to the Heath kit, because I know how Heath kits are really sensitive to leakage and really bad at isolating themselves. In fact, I would probably build another isolation transformer into my Heath kit and try to reference the chassis to a grounded power cord if I was super concerned about safety. There's horizontal lock. Alright. So, okay. Egg pattern has definitely changed a good bit, and we have, seemed like, less deflection. Let's try to unlock our potentiometer. Oh yeah, that's looking significantly better. Still not quite right, but it is an improvement. That's almost a clear victory point, but I'm still not satisfied yet. So how many more caps do we have in the vertical to check over and replace? I know I did C1, I know I did C48, and I just did C50 because it was bad. C47 is a probable issue. She is getting more egg-shaped to an extent, which does indicate that some part of the problems that it previously had are still there. C47 is definitely worth going after. It would lug down the boost and it would potentially create issues like what I'm seeing. C47, C45, and maybe C46, but C46 seems somewhat unlikely. It's not beyond being a culprit, though. Oh, quit being all roly-poly now. Yeah, she's going more egg-shaped and more egg-shaped as she warms up. So I still haven't fixed the root cause. I wonder if the spot will continue to do the thing. Last time I turned it off, the spot was fluctuating like there was video signal changes. More likely a capacitor going bad in the video stage. Well, let's see here. Which one do we want to target next? I'm going to go with C45. No. I'm going to go with C47, because if that one is lugging the boost too badly, it could actually damage the vertical size pot. We're going to go with C47. Vertical size is U. And let's see where you go. Goes over to this cap, which is a 0.1 at 600. And that would be C47. Okay. We're going to unhook that capacitor unceremoniously and test it on the Heath kit. Okay, we took that end loose, and survey says bad. Granted, we still should unsolder the other end to verify that. Okay, survey says, yeah, that's still really, really leaky. It does have a defined eye opening at approximately the correct capacitance, but that level of leakage is just unacceptable. I'm not sure when I stopped and started recording. I may have to turn this thing off and turn it back on. So, when I powered it on a moment ago, I was able to, in the first minute or so, adjust the height and linearity controls for the vertical and get a nice round circle. And after a few, which is something I wasn't able to get before, after a few moments, it devolved into this again, so I've changed all the relevant vertical stage capacitors, and by feel, the cathode resistor is getting ridiculously hot, and I have no idea what could be causing that at this point, short of maybe a bad vertical output transformer, which is something I am not going to replace on this set if it's bad. So, since we're already here and mucking around, I'm going to deground the couplet on the vertical circuit on the that has plate potential K2 and see if that helps us any. K1 theoretically shouldn't do anything bad other than kill sync to the set, and we clearly still have synchronization. K2 has been degrounded, and let's see what we get for warm-up. Oh, quit rolling, dagnabbit. That's pretty good. I do see the cone head starting. And the bottom's starting to roll up. Yeah. She's going conehead on me again. Conehead the Barbarian. What else do I have that I can deal with? Let me check one thing, because if the boost is sagging, that could be a problem. So it gets 620 boost for the vertical size, and 620 volt boost comes off of pin 2 of the flyback, and it goes to C61. Since I rather not trace that out by hand if I can avoid it. I know I can trace it out by hand if I want to, but I've got a Sam's photo fix staring me right in the face. There ought to be this nice diagram right here that shows where all the chassis capacitors are, and C61 is clamped to the chassis up on that end right there. So you are C61, and I'm not going to touch you if the chassis is running, because you are probably at 620 volts, and that would hurt. I'm just going to desolder this cap right here, check its leakage, if I can, with this mediocre tester, and then try to replace on it. So we're hooked up to it, and one lead is disconnected, and our tester says she's leaky. This is our pretty much last-ditch effort to conclusively solve this. Unless I demount the vertical output transformer and hang it in midair and see how that does. Yeah, I could do that briefly. Okay, we're gonna try this out quick with that cap changed. I really doubt we're going to get any significant change in behavior, but who really knows? It has less deflection than it did before. It is changing, but not necessarily in the way that was causing problems before. Well, maybe it is. It is getting more cone-headed. And she's going fruit roll-up on us. That sucks. Well, I'll switch it off and I'll go grab a socket and see if maybe the vertical output transformer is having leakage to ground or something silly like that. Okay, we got the vertical output transformer unscrewed and dangling precariously. Let's power it up and see what we get. I really should have grabbed needle nose pliers. I'm searing the outline of the wires I'm grabbing while desoldering with my bare fingers into the tips of my bare fingers. Okay, well... Well, this is interesting. So far it actually looks okay. Is it going to go conehead on me though? I think I am seeing a little bit of rollover, yeah. There's not rollover, fold over. I'm getting some fold over on the bottom. That's good. Well, yeah, she's going conehead on me. Well, I'm curious what's going on with the voltages on the output tube. I'm probably going to stop troubleshooting this very soon, but the cathode should be 40 volts, grid should be 0 volts, and the plate is do not measure. Duly noted. So, 1 and 3. What have you guys to say for yourselves? Let's hook chassis up to chassis, and I'm going to just get rid of my red alligator clip cable because I don't feel like clipping on. I just want to see here. I believe you are number 1, and that is 59 volts, which is very wrong. And 3 is this one, which is the cathode. The cathode is 81 volts. So the cathode being 81 volts means increased current, and this being 61 volts now. Why? Why are you getting high volts on your grid? How are you getting high volts on your grid? You shouldn't be able to get high volts on your grid. I want to remeasure the grid after it's cooled down just a bit, because it seems to reset the vertical to normal when it's been cold. I know I replaced C48 with a new capacitor. I wonder what would happen if I disconnected R60 free from the grid, or just shorted the grid to ground. Shorting the grid to ground might be a little bit excessive. What if I just short the 2.2 meg to ground? That would still ground out the signal, and that's not a great idea. I should get like a 1 meg resistor to jumper across the 2.2 meg. Matter of fact, before I even do that, let's ohm out that 2.2 meg. So, this is our 1000 ohm resistor here that feeds it. 1000 ohm resistor is just slightly out of 10% tolerance, which isn't terrible. It's not good, but it's 2.2 meg is measuring 2.6, which is a little high, but it's not that bad. I'm going to grab my alligator clip cable because now I do want to take a constant voltage measurement. We will switch back to volts so we don't burn up our meter. I mean, these flukes do protect themselves pretty good, but you know, we know the vertical output transformer isn't shorting to ground because we already floated it and that didn't improve life any. Let's just remount that thing quickly so it's not flopping around dangerously close to shorting the 5U4 into chassis and causing huge sparks and smoke and God knows what else to go wrong. Let's switch it back on. And let's wait for warm-up and then get a voltage reading on the grid. The grid should be 0 volts. Right now it's negative, which is interesting and okay. Alright, so when the site is freshly on, the grid is at around 3 to 4 volts, which is reasonable. What about cathode? Cathode is at 35 volts, which is normal. It was 80 before when it went conehead mode on me. Yeah, the Voltage is climbing. Concerningly fast at that. Why, though? What about the other side of that capacitor? That's about 86 volts. Could it be the new capacitor's leaking? It's already up to 31 volts. That's just weird. Here's an interesting idea. Theoretically, the only way positive voltage could be getting to this grid is through this 0.1 capacitor, I believe it is. Let's just take a... What is this? Let's just take a 0.68 capacitor and stick it in series. That should give us some voltage isolation and also a test point to see if we're getting leakage through the capacitors. I can measure the DC voltage in the midpoint, and that DC voltage shouldn't be a positive voltage. I don't know when I paused, but I have determined that, one, the new caps are not leaking, which is good, and that much is as I expected. In fact, right now I'm going to take back my nice little 0.68 microfarad cap that I stuck in series to test that. So at this point, I think the only way that the grid can be getting the positive voltage it's getting is leakage from the adjacent B plus from the vertical output transformer. So what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the vertical output transformer and see if the grid goes to 0 volts. Basically what we're concluding here is that the socket is bad. I really don't feel like replacing the damn socket. Okay, so the socket's disconnected. We are going to get a no vertical deflection condition pretty soon. So, yeah, that tube is staying a nice consistent negative grid voltage with the plate disconnected. So the plate is leaking through the socket to the grid of the tube, I do believe. That, or the tube itself has internal leakage, which is something I could test for. I guess I'll put the tube on the tester tomorrow, and I will maybe feel motivated enough to change out an octal socket that I don't really want to bother changing. Okay, we have made a mess. For science. What I did is, since I am too lazy to drill and or grind out the rivets that hold the old socket in, and I'm not 100% certain that the problem isn't somewhere else somehow, before I go to the effort of removing the old socket, I've just soldered a new socket in. 5 of the 8 terminal connections I transferred over. 2 of them are jumpered together as a ground on the original socket, so I did the same thing and did a little gator clip to ground, which I have now dislodged. Discussing it? Great. And there's one other that is pin 8, whatever pin 8 is, that I just jumpered from the new socket to the old socket's pin 8. Pin 1, which was, I believe, getting arcing or leakage from the output plate pin 2 adjacent to it, both of those have been disconnected from the original socket and transferred to the new socket. So at this point, if that pin starts drifting high and the tube starts cone heading on me, well, then it's some other issue other than grid leakage. Or the grid leakage is somehow inside the vacuum tube. However, I did test this vacuum tube last night and it didn't show any grid leakage of significance on that tube. So I can't imagine that that would be the issue, but then again, maybe I didn't test it for the 5 or however many minutes necessary to get the tube to go into that leakage state. I don't know. We're going to find out some things right now. Hopefully she doesn't explode on us, because I don't like explosions. If this does work the way I want to, I'll quick swap the socket out, and then I'll get the Space Command working, put this whole thing back in its cabinet, and give it a brief demonstration running correctly before I work on sending it to oblivion. Linearity doesn't look bad yet. How's the grid voltage? Grid voltage is 4 volts. And it's climbing. Well, that's bad. She hasn't gone cone heads on us yet. Cathode is 53 volts, which is a little high. Quit your rolling. Grid's up to 31 volts. Play with the height control. That's the magic key. Boy, just the 1 meg from the meter is affecting the grid voltage significantly enough to change it. Cathode is at 71 volts, which is 30 volts higher than it should be, but it doesn't look like it's going full on cone head on me. Well, I'm gonna time this out like 5-10 minutes and see how it does. It doesn't seem like it's getting worse. Bias voltages are still a little bit off, but it doesn't seem that bad. Yeah, normally by now she'd be all fruit roll-up on the bottom. This might actually be usable. Crap, now I have to drill out the old socket. She's still pretty linear way over there. Meanwhile, fuel pump no worky, cranker no worky. She ain't going fruit roll up or excessively cone head. A little bit stretched, but not bad. I've almost done a full front lawn mow, so this thing's probably been running for 10 or 20 minutes. I'm gonna say this is okay, aside from I might just, well, there's 2 things I'm going to do. One, I gotta install that socket properly so I can put the chassis back in the cabinet without crushing the tube. 2, I think I'm going to try jumping a few of the electrolytics and see if I can get rid of this hum. Okay. Tube socket has been replaced. I just crudely kind of tack-soldered the metal ears on it to the chassis. That's an interesting look for initial warm-up. It might change as the tubes come up to full operating voltage. So I want to see if I can knock that ripple down a little bit. I've got some 68 micro 450 volt cap salvaged out of a flat screen. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the main filter can, and I'm gonna jumper these suckers in and see if they make any difference anywhere. And if they do, I'm just gonna tack one in parallel for the duration of the resurrection, because I just wanna not have the rolling hum bar. Why you lose signal? Tuner dirty? Yeah, tuner's dirty. You can see that hum bar rolling. Let's see here. So there's 3 sections on this lytic. Okay. Doesn't really seem to stop the hum bar. Yeah, doesn't. That doesn't do much. So there's one up here. That's not helping tremendously. What about there? Does that do much? It does not do much. About that one. It's still not fixing it. Possible it's just being lugged down by the by a cat being leaky electrically. If that's the case, the parallelism I'm doing isn't going to make a big difference. Yeah, aside from centering being off, which it's going to be because the whole chassis is rotated with respect to the Earth's magnetic field, that looks like a pretty decent picture. Next on the to-do list is the Space Command chassis. Nothing. Bottom cover removal completed. Boy, it doesn't seem like there's really any electrolytics in this thing. Aside from that little 5. Oh, I see it. There's the electrolytic. I'm going to do some voltage checks and probably just recap this thing because I want it to work and I want to keep the Space Command chassis, so I might as well put some real effort into it. Okay, so we fixed the remote chassis. You can see that relay kicking on. You can also watch the remote motor do its thing. Get back to channel 13. There we are. Okay. So, all we had to do to fix it was replace C14 and C13, lucky C13, on the grids to the relay driver tubes. Those good old capacitors, these white ceramic good old capacitors are all bad, as expected. So changing those got us our remote unit back. At this point, I believe every part of the electronics of this television are now operable. I am going to now work on getting this whole thing packaged back into its cabinet so we can give it a little demonstration run and kind of a send-off on this set's existence as an intact, complete item, and celebration of its transition to being a part support set to my other Zenith a year older that I want to make remote. Here's the receipt for all the components that we changed out. Okay, time to give this thing a demonstration run. Got the dial light for the Space Command hook working. Have Space Command working. Audio's gotten a little distorty doodle. Ooh, warm-up dot. Twice the dot for half the price. Geometry's pretty good. Audio's a little distorted. I think one of the caps in the audio circuit's going bad. Let's have the intro scene to the Groove Tube. This was a pretty short-lived remote. I think Zenith only made this for like somewhere between 1 and 3 years, between 61 and I like to say somewhere around the time color television came in. They redesigned their remote hand units. Electronically, it's not too bad of a set. Cabinet-wise, it's a great design, but it's in terrible condition. So, I'm going to get this side glued back up, and then I'm going to put this TV on Facebook Marketplace. I'm probably going to ask about $150, give or take, for the set complete with all of its remote parts. I bought this set as a remote donor for my other Zenith, and for me to walk away from the remote parts, I gotta make enough of a profit for it to be worth it. If someone wants just the empty cabinet minus the bezel and the chassis and all that stuff, and minus the speakers and everything, I would probably let this go for like $14-15, something like that. The cabinet's probably gonna end up at the curb if no one takes it. Of course you're gonna roll. It was going so good and then you ruined it! That's a Zenith those monkeys are hopping around, by the way. About the same vintage as this set. I have a year or two later Zenith in the same cabinet as that. I'm going to get the side glued back on the cabinet of this pretty soon. Chair. Hasta la vista, reel-to-reel tape player. I'm gonna sit on you.
Licensed secretary starts romance in a see-through blouse and red-hot pants. But Babs irate about his date and is legally separated. Babs psychiatrist eventually evokes that her mother brought a spectacles but never held her close. Boy tells him that the marriage was a failure because neither he nor Babs has any genitalia. Now Babs and Roy are made by B&B. Accessories and dolls sold separately. Welcome to the cramped TV kitchen. Tonight we are featuring the festive holiday dish, which is a traditional favorite in Newark and sure to delight your entire family. 4th of July, Heritage Loaf. Begin by putting the inside of a large, shallow casserole dish with Cramp Easy Lube brand vegetable shortening and place in your refrigerator to cool. While the first casserole dish is cooling, take a similar casserole dish, coat it with Cramp Easy Lube brand vegetable shortening, and place it in an oven which has been preheated to 350 degrees. Next, peel and core a large Rome apple. Insert the peel into the hollow center and coat the entire apple with Cramp Easy Lube brand vegetable shortening. Now roll the apple in a half-and-half mixture of sifted flour and breadcrumbs and set aside. Spread a half cup of leftover mashed potatoes on the palm of your right hand. Place an onion in the center and clench your hand into a fist while moving your fingers from side to side to coat the onion evenly. Dip your hand in a bowl of ice water and open it quickly so that the onion floats to the top. Now bring out the casserole that was cooling in the refrigerator and into it drain off the water. Set the onion aside. Return the casserole to the refrigerator to cool. Take the apple which we cored earlier and cut it in half. Remove the apple peel from the core and fasten it with toothpicks around the outside of the apple. Cover with Cramp Easy Lube brand vegetable shortening and set aside. Pit a half dozen black olives and a half dozen Bing cherries. Insert the olive pits into the pitted cherries. Then, insert the cherries, into which we have just inserted the olive pits, into the pitted olives. Remove the cool casserole from the refrigerator and into it place the stuffed olives. Return the casserole to the refrigerator once again to cool. Take the apple we prepared earlier and discard the peel. Place the apple in the casserole which is now in the refrigerator. Next, bring out the casserole which was originally in the oven and is now in the oven and place it on the table. Coat your hands with Cramp Easy Lube brand vegetable shortening and knead the contents of each at the same time. Pour equal amounts of each casserole into 2 8-inch bread pans and let stand overnight. And now, here is our finished 4th of July Heritage Loaf, which we prepared last night in our cramped TV kitchen and is now ready for the table. Spread a layer of cramped dairy foam whipped cream substitute between the loaves. Pour a special 4th of July holiday treat. Decorate with a miniature version of Old Glory. You'll smile with pride as your family enjoys Cramp's 4th of July Heritage Love. She took care of the baby all day, cooked a great dinner, and even went to a school meeting. And look at her. She looks better than any of her friends. She takes care of herself. Gets her rest, does her sit-ups, watches her diet, and to make sure she gets enough iron and vitamins, she takes Gelatin every morning. Makes me take it, too. More than twice the iron of ordinary supplements, plus 7 vitamins. Take care of yourself. Take Gelatin. All right. I think I'll keep her. Good evening. Our topic for tonight's discussion is the free world economy. Where is it going? The guests on our panel are Dr. James Pendleton, Chairman of the Atlantic Monetary Foundation, Henry Gladstone, Professor of Economics at Frick University, Stuart Felton, Editor of the World Banking Quarterly, and Dr. Robert Chambers, President of the Norstad Council for Economic Development. My first question, and perhaps we can hear from Dr. Chambers on this, is where does the free world economy stand at this time? Of course, this is always a difficult thing to ascertain, but I think it would be somewhat accurate to say that the current situation is in transition. Gold and silver markets, although these are rarely indicative of the long-range picture, show an energetic movement causing no small amount of speculation, actually. Readjustment seems to be geared to the combined influences now of the gross products of industrial markets and the ever-shifting labor picture. I would definitely agree with you.
How gross? Brown 25 gross?
That the world trade market is oftentimes a very helpful indicator of the 30-day trend. No. And one can see in this case a perceptible movement toward a move overall level. Forgive me for interrupting you, but I think we're missing a very important point here. I'll take the hammer choose. The Atlantic Treaty Commission, as I think we're all aware, yesterday issued a report stating that the Central European nations have shown a combined rise in copper standard of about 1/2 of 1%. Something really about Sure, you put in 8 big hours breaking your back for a few lousy bucks. You've earned the right to blow off some steam, and that's when Butts comes in mighty handy. We know a lot about hard-working Joes like you. You like to grab on a life right now. Like they say, you only get to go around once, so it might as well be with a bartender, right? And that's why we brew butts when you're having more milk. In times like this, when the going gets rough, you could use a case of It's not a flavor you can savor when your baseball glass is through. When you're out of butts. Direct from our newsroom in New York, it's the Channel 1 Evening News with Robert Elgin and Leo Batfish in Zuckmuck Dick, Bertram Tippertonton in Bath, Mechanica in Washington, D.C., Freddie Fagel in Minneapolis, and Lionel Elgin in New York. Good evening. Enemy sappers attacked Allied supply bases in Nam Wang earlier today. Casualties were reported high in the Gulf of Khaki and in nearby Fokyu, where enemy helicopters were bound by rock-throwing peasant women. General Chow, commander of Allied forces in Lanlang, divided his troops into 2 columns and ordered 3 units from column A and 2 units from column B into ground fighting there. American troops were on hand, and here with a report is Leo Batfish in Suck Nut Dick. Drags on. This is Leo Batfish in Suck Nut Dick. The Russians' new space program got off to an inauspicious start today, apparently due to a gas leak aboard the giant Scratch-and-Itch 3 rocket. Here via satellite is a tape report from Thirteen Fifterton in Bath.
The Soviet Union today launched a Scratch-and-Itch 3 rocket with 1 Russian cosmonaut aboard. Soon after takeoff, the trouble began. Director of the mission, Vladimir Getcheroksov, alerted the flight commander, Yuri Vosnovsky, of a dangerous amyl nitrate leak into the rocket's fresh air and cooling system. Apparently dazed by the noxious chemical, Commander Vosnovsky disregarded orders and, donning his spacesuit, jumped out of the giant spacecraft. Narrowly escaping doom with the aid of his British-built jet-propelled rocket pack, the berserk Russian spaceman, apparently enraged by the technical malfunctions plaguing the Soviet space program, launched a one-man assault on the mission control headquarters. In a typically Russian display of pique, Vosnovsky fought for several minutes with scientists involved in the ill-fated launching. Alexei Rudnotny, an authority on solar wind and former Olympic discus thrower, finally overcame cosmonaut Vosnovsky by driving him into the atomic pile. His present condition is unknown. Meanwhile, the abandoned rocket on a collision course for St. Peter's Basilica in Rome was detonated. This is Thurston Fifterton in Bath. The President went to the airwaves this evening in a televised address to the nation. Commenting upon the spirit of dissent abroad in the land, the President reaffirmed his confidence in the basic strength of the American people. I'm in the driver's seat. I run the show. I'm the fucking President.
5 years ago, a team of scientists working at Uranus discovered a unique polyester. It had a rare combination of properties which would make it suitable for reaming, sheeting, molding, and cutting. It could be used as insulation, lubricant, construction material, and fuel. Among other characteristics, it had the strength of steel, the flexibility of rubber, and the nutritional value of beef stew. This revolutionary substance, developed at Uranus, is Brown 25. The variety of products which can be made from this incredible new material is unlimited. From a suspension bridge to a child's plaything, Brown 25 does the job and does it for less. Brown 25, another fine product from Uranus. At Uranus, things come out a little differently.
And that's the way it is, was, and will be. And this is Robert Elgin for Channel One News, hoping that your news is good news. Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow. No matter what the news may be, this time or any time, until next time, have a good time all the time.
night wherever you are. So this thing is going to be up for sale as a cabinet or as a complete set. If you like this video, please leave a like. Consider subscribing for more vintage television and electronics and other content. Consider subscribing for more content like this. Thanks for watching.